Hello everyone and welcome to today's session. And today we'll be discussing the exercises related to the chapter ecosystem. This is the disclaimer. So today we'll be discussing the basic concepts related to the chapter ecosystem by working through NCERT exercises. So these exercises they are based on some concepts. We'll discuss these concepts by discussing NCERT exercises. Okay, so today we'll be discussing NCERT exercises for the chapter ecosystem. Okay, so let's begin with this session. These are the fill in the blanks type question. Okay, the first one is plants are called as dash because they fix carbon dioxide. Second one, in an ecosystem dominated by trees, the pyramid of number is dash type. Then option number C. Okay, the third one is in aquatic ecosystem, the limiting factor for the productivity is. The fourth fill in the blank is common detritivores in our ecosystem are. Then the fifth one is a major reservoir of carbon on earth is. So let's have a look at the answer. See, let's discuss the answer for the first fill in the blanks. So answer is autotrophs. So plants are called as autotrophs because they fix carbon dioxide. Okay. So plants they can make their own food using carbon dioxide, water and sunlight, and this process is known as photosynthesis. And along with this, a pigment known as chlorophyll is also involved. So this chlorophyll pigment absorbs the sunlight. Now next one, in an ecosystem dominated by trees, the pyramid of number is of inverted type. Yeah, so let's have a look at the explanation of this answer. So in an ecosystem dominated by trees, the pyramid of number is inverted because there are very few large trees compared to the large number of smaller organisms like insects, bacteria, and small animals that depend on trees for food and shelter, which explains why the number of producers is less than the number of consumers in this type of ecosystem. Next question, in aquatic ecosystem, the limiting factor for productivity is. The answer is light. Light is a main factor that limits how much life can grow and thrive because plants and other organisms need light for photosynthesis. Okay, so plant they are autotrophs. They can carry out photosynthesis. And animals they are dependent on the plants. Without enough light, especially in the deeper waters, these organisms means producers they cannot produce enough energy, which slows down the growth of the whole ecosystem. Now next one is common detritivores in our ecosystem are earthworms. So detritivores like earthworms play a vital role in the ecosystem by breaking down dead organic matter such as fallen leaves and dead animals into simpler substances. This process is known as decomposition. Decomposition helps recycle nutrients back into the soil, making them available for plants to use. Earthworm also improves soil structure by creating tunnels which allow air and water to move through the soil, promoting healthy plant growth. Next one, a major reservoir of carbon on Earth is oceans. The ocean act as a major reservoir of carbon on Earth because they contain large amount of dissolved carbon in the form of carbon dioxide, carbonate ions and other organic compounds. This carbon is stored in water and sediments of the ocean, helping to regulate the Earth's carbon cycle by absorbing atmospheric carbon dioxide and preventing excessive buildup in the atmosphere. Next question, which one of the following has the largest population in a food chain? The options are producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers and decomposers. What will be the correct answer? Okay, option number D, decomposers is the correct answer. Let's have a look at the explanation. See, decomposers break down dead organic matter into simpler substances which help recycle nutrients back into the soil, making them available for plants to use again. Now, the process of recycling nutrients back into the ecosystem is essential for maintaining life, as it ensures that essential elements like carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus are reused rather than lost. These organisms, such as bacteria and fungi, are microscopic in size and cannot be seen with the naked eye. These microscopic decomposers population is very large. Okay, let's talk about the reasons for that. So this is because their small size allows them to occupy tiny spaces and reproduce quickly, enabling them to exist in huge quantities in a given environment. Now, these organisms can survive in many different environments and can multiply quickly, which helps them spread and adapt to new places easily. Okay, let's continue the answer. Now, producers like plants are the foundation of the food chain because they make their own food using sunlight, and this process is known as photosynthesis. They convert sunlight into energy through photosynthesis. While they are numerous, they are not the largest group in terms of population. Now, the primary consumers, this was one of the options. They are the animals that eat producers, which are mainly plants. Their population is dependent on the availability of the producers. Now, generally, they are less numerous than producers because not all plants can support a large number of herbivores. Let's talk about the secondary consumer. They get energy by eating the primary consumers. They are often carnivores or omnivores. Now, their population is usually smaller because energy is lost at each trophic level. In a food chain, only 10% of the energy from one level is passed on to the next. So, there is less energy available for secondary consumers, which limits their number compared to primary consumers. And this leads to fewer individuals being supported. Next question, the second trophic level in a lake is. Okay, so lake is an aquatic ecosystem. Now, what are the options? Phytoplankton, zooplankton, benthos, and fishes. What will be the correct answer? So option number B, zooplankton is the correct answer. Let's have a look at the explanation. See, first trophic level is occupied by the producers. Now, phytoplankton, they are microscopic algae that float in the water and are most important producers in many aquatic ecosystems, especially the ocean. Aquatic plants like seaweed, sea grasses, or freshwater lilies also make their own food through photosynthesis. So they act as producers in the aquatic ecosystem. Now, these organisms, such as plants, algae, and some bacteria, are able to make their own food using a process called as photosynthesis. Now, let's continue the discussion. Let's talk about the second trophic level, which are the primary consumers. So these organisms are the herbivores of the water. They get their energy by eating the producers. So zooplanktons are the microscopic animals found in water bodies playing a vital role in aquatic food chain by feeding on phytoplankton and serving as food source for small fish. So these zooplankton, they are themselves food for the small fish and other aquatic animals. So second trophic level is occupied by the zooplankton. They are small aquatic invertebrates, and these organisms feed on phytoplankton and other primary producers. Here this is an image showing you zooplankton. So they are animal-like organism. Okay, let's talk about the third trophic level. This is occupied by the secondary consumers. Small fishes like minnows and bluegill, they eat zooplankton and aquatic insects. Some large invertebrates such as crabs and shrimp also feed on primary consumers. Now, these organisms are secondary consumers in the food chain as they feed on zooplankton and other primary consumers, which are usually small animals that eat plants. And let's talk about the fourth trophic level, which is occupied by the tertiary consumers. Now, large fishes like tuna, bass, and lake trout, they prey on smaller fishes from the third trophic level. Now, top predators, they are the highest level consumers in a food chain. So, the fourth trophic level is occupied by the top predators. These predators, they feed on the other animals and they do not have natural predators of their own. Remember this. Top predators are such as sharks and seals. Here, so obviously in lake you will not see these sharks and seals. Here, so we are talking in generally about the aquatic ecosystem. So these organisms feed on smaller fishes and other secondary consumers. Now benthos, one option was bentho. These are the organisms that live on or in the bottom sediments of water bodies like ocean, lakes or rivers. They include a variety of life forms such as small animals, plants and microorganisms that are adapted to life in the sediment layers. Now, they can occupy various trophic levels depending on their feeding habits. So they don't have a single trophic level because their position in the food chain depends on the way they eat or their diet. Next question, secondary producers are. So you have the four options: herbivores, producers, carnivores or none of the above. What will be the correct answer? Option number D, none of the above is the correct answer. Now, the term secondary producer is not scientifically accurate or commonly used because in ecological food chain, producers are organisms like plants that make their own food through photosynthesis, while consumers, which are herbivores and carnivores, eat the producers. Instead, organisms in a food chain are typically classified as producers, which are the autotrophs. So these are the organisms that can make their own food using sunlight. They are at the base of the food chain. Now, primary consumers, these are the herbivores. They are the animals that eat plants. They play an important role in the food chain by consuming producers like plants and algae, which form the base of the ecosystem. Examples include deer, rabbits, and insects. So these are herbivores. Next one are the secondary consumers. Okay, so these are the first level carnivores, or you can say primary carnivores. They are the organisms that eat primary consumers, which are usually herbivores. Then we have the tertiary consumers, which are the top predators. They are the organisms that eat other animals and are at the highest level of the food chain, meaning they don't have any natural predators in their environment. Example include lions, eagles, and humans. Okay. Now, one of the option is herbivore. Herbivores are the primary consumers. They are not producers of any kind. Then producers, they are the organisms that can make their own food. They are also known as autotrophs. Then carnivore, these are the consumers, not the producers. Here again, producers like plants are organisms that can convert solar energy into chemical energy through photosynthesis. This we have already discussed. And consumers include herbivores and carnivores, and they depend directly or indirectly on the producers for their energy. So herbivores, they depend directly on the producers, whereas carnivores, they depend indirectly on the consumers. Now in an ecosystem, energy flows in one direction, starting from producers like plants, which make their own food using sunlight. Now, this energy is then passed to primary consumers such as herbivores, which eat the producers. Next, secondary consumers like small carnivores eat the primary consumers, and finally, tertiary consumers such as large carnivores eat the secondary consumers. Now, this flow continues through the food chain with energy decreasing at each level because some energy is lost as heat. Next question, what is the percentage of photosynthetically active radiation in the incident solar radiation? So you have four options: 100%, 50%, 1 to 5%, and 2 to 10%. So what will be the correct answer? Okay, option number B, 50% is the correct answer. So PAR stands for the portion of solar radiation that plants can effectively use for photosynthesis. This specific range of light, usually between 400 to 700 nanometer, is known as photosynthetically active radiation. Now, visible light is the part of the electromagnetic spectrum that human can see with a wavelength ranging from 400 to 700 nanometer. Okay. Now, it is known that about 50% of the total solar radiation falls within the range of PAR. So, PAR we have already discussed. It refers to the part of sunlight spectrum that plants can use for photosynthesis. So, about 50% of the total solar radiation that reaches Earth falls within the PAR range, which is between 400 to 700 nanometer. Now, when we look at the sunlight that reaches the Earth, about half of it or 50% is in the part of the light spectrum that plants can use for photosynthesis, and this is known as photosynthetically active radiation. This we have discussed. Now, plant use only 2 to 10% of the total sunlight that reaches them, and this is known as PAR. Now, this percentage refers to the amount of PAR that is utilized by the plant. So, only 2 to 10% of the PAR is utilized by the plant for their growth and for carrying out the photosynthesis. Now, when discussing photosynthesis, we should not focus on percentage of photosynthetically active radiation, but rather on the actual amount of PAR available for photosynthesis, as it directly influences the rate of photosynthesis in the plants. Next question, distinguish between grazing food chain and detritus food chain, production and decomposition, upright and inverted pyramid, food chain and food web, litter and detritus, and primary and secondary productivity. So what will be the answer here? Let's have a look at the answer. First, let's talk about the difference between grazing food chain and detritus food chain. Now you can see the grazing food chain gets its energy directly from the sun, starting with producers like plants, which are then consumed by the herbivores. And in turn, herbivores are consumed by the carnivores. So this chain typically involves larger, more visible organism and is the main energy pathway in many aquatic ecosystem as well. Okay, as well as you can say terrestrial ecosystem as well. Okay. Now, in contrast, the detritus food chain gets its energy from dead organic matter such as fallen leaves and animal remains. It starts with decomposers and detritivores like fungi and earthworm, which break down this material and are then eaten by the other organism. While this chain is comparatively smaller, it is responsible for a huge amount of energy flow in terrestrial ecosystem, acting as a vital recycling system that returns nutrients to the soil for use by the producers. Okay, so you can see a lot of energy of the grazing food chain flows through the detritus food chain. So herbivores, they are not able to eat all of the biomass produced by the producers. So this biomass remains in the ecosystem. This biomass is degraded by the ecosystem, by the decomposers and the detritivores. So we say large part of the energy of the grazing food chain passes through the detritus food chain. Here in this image you can see the examples of the food chain, and here image on the right also shows you image of the detritus food chain. So detritus food chain starts with the detritus. Okay, this detritus is broken down by the detritivores and then further by the decomposers. Okay, clear? And with this the nutrients are recycled back into the soil. Okay, here you can see a grazing food chain system also, which starts with the producers, which are the plants. Then you can see first trophic level is occupied by the producers, then the next trophic level is occupied by the herbivores, and then the carnivores. So there are producers, then there are primary consumers, which are herbivores, then secondary consumers, then tertiary consumers. Okay. Let's discuss differences between production and decomposition. Now, production is the process by which producers like plants make their own food using sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide through photosynthesis. So this creates organic matter which forms the base of the food chain. Now, decomposition, on the other hand, is a breakdown of dead organic matter by decomposers such as bacteria and fungi, converting it into simpler substances like water, carbon dioxide, and nutrients that can be reused by other organisms. So decomposition does not need sunlight and relies on decomposers to recycle nutrients in the ecosystem. Okay, so what is production? It is a rate of producing food, means organic matter by the producers. And then decomposition, this is the disintegration of complex organic matter from the bodies of dead animals and plants with the help of decomposers. Okay. So finally, in decomposition, the organic matter is converted into inorganic nutrients. And there are a lot of steps involved in decomposition: fragmentation, leaching, catabolism, humification, and mineralization. Now, if we talk about production, for primary production, sunlight is required. For decomposition, no sunlight is required. Now, the production or the productivity is dependent on the photosynthetic capacity of the producers, means how much they can absorb sunlight and how much biomass they can produce. Then decomposition, it takes place with the help of decomposers like fungi and bacteria. Now let's talk about the difference between upright and inverted pyramids. So upright pyramid, this is okay, like energy of pyramid, this is always upright because energy is lost at each step and only 10% of the energy is being transferred to the next trophic level. Inverted pyramid, okay, so they are the opposite of upright pyramid. In upright pyramid, the base is broad. In inverted pyramid, the apex is broad. Okay. Now the pyramid of number and pyramid of biomass, in some cases they can be inverted, but pyramid of energy is always upright. The pyramid of number can be inverted in the case of parasitic food chain, and the pyramid of biomass is inverted in the case of marine ecosystem. Here, the pyramid of energy is always upright because the energy is, when it is transferred from one trophic level to another trophic level, okay, there is an energy loss and only 10% of energy is being transferred to the next trophic level. Okay, here. So here you can see inverted pyramids. You should know the examples in which cases the pyramid of number and pyramid of biomass is inverted. So here you will see the first trophic level in case of inverted pyramid, that will be very narrow, and as you move upwards, these, you can say, these trophic level become wider and wider. Here this is an image showing you upright pyramid of energy. Pyramid of number is inverted in the case of parasitic food chain, and pyramid of biomass is inverted in the case of marine ecosystem. Clear? Okay, now moving on to the next one, difference between food chain and food web. Now, food chain constitute for a single linear sequence of entities, and food web this consists of a number of interconnected food chains. Now, regarding food chain, the members of the food chain inhabiting higher trophic levels feed only on one type of entity. In the case of food web, any given individual has alternative option for food sources. So in the case of food web, one species or one organism, it has, you can say, multiple options for food. Here it can occupy different trophic level as well. Where in the case of food chain, the members of the food chain will only occupy one trophic level and they have only one food source. Here in this image you can see a food chain on the left and the food web on the right. Here you can see in the food web there is an interconnection of the food chains. Okay, so here you can see different food chains are connected. There is one food chain starting from the trees. Then you can see goats, which are the herbivores. They are eating plants, and then goat in turn is eaten up by the lion. Similarly, there is another food chain, plant, and then rabbit, and then you can see this is a wild cat which is eating the rabbit. Then wild cat is eaten up by the lion. So lion have multiple food sources. Okay, and all the chains are interconnected. So food webs are actually more realistic in nature as compared to food chains. Here in food chain you can see snake can only feed on frog and frog can only feed on grasshopper. Next is difference between litter and the detritus. So litter comprises of all kinds of waste above the ground level, whereas the detritus comprises of residues of dead animals and plants. Okay. Now the litter consists of biodegradable and non-biodegradable substances, whereas detritus consists of only biodegradable substances, means only it contains only organic matter. Next one, difference between primary and secondary productivity. So the primary productivity, it is the amount of organic matter generated by producers per unit area over a specific span of time. And secondary productivity is the rate of generating organic matter by consumers over a span of time. This is known as secondary productivity. Okay. Here, so secondary productivity is the rate at which consumers, such as animals, produce organic matter by eating producers and converting it into their own biomass. And primary productivity refers to the amount of organic matter produced by producers, like plants, through photosynthesis in a given area over a specific time. Next question, describe the components of an ecosystem. So let's have a look at the answer. See, an ecosystem is not just a collection of living things and non-living things. It includes both the biological community as well as the non-living components of an area. So an ecosystem is made up of two main parts, the living and the non-living. The living part are all the plants, animals and bacteria and fungi. The non-living part are things like sunlight, water, soil and air. Now the plants which are living need sunlight and water. Okay, water is a non-living thing. Okay, so here you can see the living things are also dependent on the non-living things. Plants require nutrient, soil and water to grow. Here, plants also need animals and insects. They need insects for pollination. They need plants to disperse the seeds. They need animals to disperse the seeds. So The living organism, they are also interacting in the ecosystem, and the living organism, they are also interacting with the non-living components of the ecosystem. The ecosystem consists of biotic and the abiotic components. Clear? And then you have the decomposers also, which help in the nutrient cycling. In an ecosystem, you will see processes going on like productivity, okay, then energy flow. Then you can also observe the nutrient cycling as well. Clear? So you will see nutrient cycling, energy flow, decomposition, and productivity. These are the 4 processes going on in an ecosystem. Now there are many ecosystems such as pond, forest, grasses, grassland, etc. So you have aquatic as well as terrestrial ecosystem. In all these ecosystems, you have biotic components and the abiotic component. Biotic components are the living component of the ecosystem. That includes biotic factors such as producers, consumers, and decomposers. Now, plants, they are the producers. Algae, they are also the producers. They contain chlorophyll pigment, okay, which helps in the capture of the light energy. Now, they are also called converters or transducers. So, they have the ability to convert light energy from the sun into chemical energy through the process of photosynthesis. Now, consumers or heterotroph are organisms that are directly, okay, or they are indirectly dependent on the producers for their food. Okay, so consumers, they can be herbivores or they can be carnivores. So primary consumers, they are the herbivores, and secondary and tertiary consumers, they are the carnivores. Decomposers, they are the microorganisms such as bacteria and fungi. They help in nutrient cycling, and they form the largest population in the food chain because they are microscopic and they can divide very fast. Okay, so these decomposers, they obtain nutrients by breaking down the remains of dead plant and animals. So these decomposers, they feed on the dead and decaying organic matter. They feed on detritus. Next one is the abiotic components. These are the non-living components of the ecosystem, so the light, temperature, water, soil, air, inorganic nutrients, etc. Next question, define ecological pyramids and describe each with examples, pyramid of number and biomass. Let's have a look at the answer. See, an ecological pyramid is a graphical representation of various important parameters of ecology. Okay, so an ecological pyramid is a graphical representation of various ecological parameters such as number of individuals present at each trophic level, amount of energy, or the biomass present at each trophic level. So there is energy pyramid of number, pyramid of energy, and pyramid of biomass. Now each ecological pyramid represents producers at the base. So producers are always present at the base. Okay, producer, these are the autotrophs such as plants and algae, and phytoplankton in the case of aquatic ecosystem. Now apex represent the top level consumers present in the ecosystem such as lions or the eagles, which are at the highest position in the ecosystem hierarchy. There are 3 types of pyramid: pyramid of number, pyramid of energy, and then pyramid of biomass. Let's talk about the pyramid of number. See, it is a graphical representation of number of individuals present at each trophic level in a food chain of an ecosystem. A pyramid of number can be upright or inverted depending on the number of the producers. It can be upright when there are more producers like plants than the consumers, or inverted when there are fewer producers but more consumers, such as you can see in the pond ecosystem. And pyramid of number can be inverted in the case of parasitic food chain as well. Here the number of parasites are more as compared to the single tree. Okay, so there is a tree, then on this tree you can see a lot of insects are there on the tree. Clear? So number of insects are more as compared to the single tree. Now, for example, in a grassland ecosystem, the pyramid of number is always upright. In this type of food chain, the number of producers, which are the plant or the grasses, you can say, is followed by the number of herbivores, which are the grasshopper. So here the number of producers is more as compared to the herbivores, which are the grasshopper. And then further, the number of secondary consumer will be less as compared to this herbivore. Okay, so in turn, this is followed by a number of secondary consumers, which are snake, and tertiary carnivores, which are eagle. So in this case, what you can see, the pyramid of the number will be upright, because as you are moving upward, the number of the organism, they are decreasing. So here the highest number is that of the producers, and then of the herbivores, and then primary consumers, and then secondary consumers. Okay, and finally tertiary carnivores. The number of tertiary carnivores is the least. So you get the upright pyramid where you have the base is wide and the apex is narrow. Okay, hence the number of individual at the producer level will be maximum in the upright pyramid of number. Now, number of individual present at top carnivore will be least. That's why you get upright pyramid. So this you can see, this is an image showing you pyramid of number for a grassland ecosystem. It is upright. Okay, clear? So here you can see number of primary producer is more as compared to primary consumers, and number of primary consumer is more as compared to secondary consumers, and number of secondary consumer is more as compared to tertiary consumers. Now next question, on the other hand, parasitic food chain, the number of pyramid is inverted. So in this food chain, a single tree acts as a producer by making its own food through photosynthesis, and several fruit eating birds feeds on these fruits, making them primary consumers. Now, this in turn supports insects because these fruit eating birds might have many tiny insects living on them. So the number go from one tree to many birds to even more insects. So that's why the pyramid of number here will be inverted. Let's talk about pyramid of biomass. So pyramid of biomass shows the total living weight of the organism at each level of a food chain in the ecosystem. And this type of pyramid of biomass could also be either upright or inverted depending on the total number of organisms that reflects into the biomass present at each trophic level. Clear? Now in grassland and forest ecosystem, the pyramid of biomass is upright because the biomass of the producer level, at the producer level, such as plant, is much higher than the top carnivore level. Okay, now the pyramid of biomass is inverted in the case of aquatic ecosystem like pond ecosystem. Okay, so here in aquatic ecosystem, producers, they are the phytoplankton. They have a very low biomass compared to the consumers, such as zooplankton and fishes. So in the food chain, the biomass of fishes is higher than that of zooplankton, because fishes are at the higher trophic level and accumulate more energy from the zooplankton they eat, while zooplankton, being primary consumer, have a large population but lower biomass per individual. This is an image showing you upright, you can say, pyramid in the case of grassland, and you can see inverted pyramid in the case of pond ecosystem. This is, you can say, inverted pyramid of biomass in the case of pond ecosystem, and upright in the case of grassland ecosystem. Next question, what is the primary productivity? Give brief description of factors that affect the primary productivity. Let's have a look at the answer. C. Net primary productivity in ecology. We have discussed the definition of primary productivity. It is defined as the amount of organic matter biomass produced by producers per unit area over a period of time. And primary productivity of an ecosystem depends on various environmental factors. These are light, water, precipitation. It also depends on the availability of nutrients and the availability of plants to carry out photosynthesis. Next question, define decomposition and describe the processes and products of decomposition. Next one, decomposition is the process in which complex organic matter like dead plants and animals is broken down into simpler substances by microorganisms such as bacteria or fungi, returning nutrients to the soil and helping in cycling of matter in an ecosystem. So in decomposition, finally, the organic matter is converted into inorganic nutrients. Now, source of this organic matter is the body of dead plants and the animals. Now, decomposers break down dead organic matter into simpler inorganic substances such as carbon dioxide, water, and minerals. Various processes involved in decomposition are as follows. First one is fragmentation. So the first step in the process of decomposition is the breakdown or fragmentation or dead organic matter. So with the help of fragmentation, what is happening? You can say organic matter is broken down into smaller pieces. Okay, it is broken down into fragments. Now these small animals, okay, or the plants, they are known as detrite. You can say decomposition is done by the detritivores and the decomposers. Okay, clear? Now during fragmentation, what is happening? There is a breakdown of detritus into smaller pieces by the action of detritivores such as earthworms. Next one is leaching. Now this process refers to the leaching of water soluble nutrients from the topsoil into deeper soil layers, where they become logged in the soil as unavailable salts, making them inaccessible for the plant roots. This occurs primarily due to water movement through the soil, which carries dissolved nutrients downwards beyond the reach of the plant roots, thereby reducing soil fertility over time. Next one is catabolism. This process is called decomposition, where bacteria and fungi break down dead organic matter known as detritus, using enzymes to convert it into simpler substances like carbon dioxide, water, and minerals, which are reused by the plants. Next one is humification. Humification is the formation of humus. Okay, clear? So here humus is a dark colored substance. Okay, it is colloidal, it is dark colored, amorphous substance. Humus improves soil fertility by holding water and nutrients, making it easier for the plants to absorb them. Now, it acts as a reservoir of nutrients for the plants because humus, it breaks down very slowly. Okay, it is resistant to microbial degradation. It degrades very slowly. That's why it acts as a reservoir of the nutrients. Clear? Then the next step is mineralization. Finally, humus is further degraded by the action of the microorganisms. This degradation is very slow. That's why the nutrients they remain in the soil. So this leads to release of inorganic nutrients into the soil. Okay, this is known as mineralization. Next question, give an account of energy flow in an ecosystem. Let's have a look at the answer. See, energy enters in an ecosystem from the sun. So sun is the main source of energy on the earth. Now solar radiation, which are a form of energy from the sun, passes through earth's atmosphere and reach the earth's surface where they are absorbed by the plants. Plants have the pigment chlorophyll. This chlorophyll pigment absorbs the sunlight. Now, these radiation, mainly sunlight, provide the energy needed for the plants to perform photosynthesis. Now, sun's energy also keeps the earth at a comfortable temperature, which is necessary for all living things to survive. Some solar radiations are reflected by the earth's surface, meaning that not all the sunlight that reaches the earth is absorbed. Only about 2 to 10% of the sunlight that reaches earth is used by the green plant. Basically, 2 to 10% of the PAR is utilized by the plant to carry out photosynthesis, through which they make their own food. Okay, now there are two kinds of productivity: gross primary productivity and net primary productivity. Gross primary productivity is the total amount of biomass that plants produce through photosynthesis in a given area and time, which means it measures how much energy plants capture from sunlight to make their food. Now, these green plants are consumed by the herbivores. Okay, so you can see the first trophic level, these are occupied by the producers. They are producing biomass, they are producing energy through photosynthesis. Then the next trophic level is occupied by the herbivores. These herbivores, they are feeding on the plants. Okay, clear? And only 10% of the energy is being transferred from producers to the consumers, or you can say from producers to the primary consumers, which are the herbivores. The rest of the energy is lost in the form of heat. Okay, so about 90% of the energy is lost at each trophic level. Yes, only 10% of the stored energy from the producers is transferred to the herbivores. So this is an image showing you energy flow in the ecosystem. Here you can see plants, they occupy the first trophic level. They are the producers and they capture sunlight and they convert sunlight into food. Now you can see the second trophic level. These are the primary consumers. These are also known as herbivores. They are feeding on the plants. Okay, but the energy is being lost in the form of heat here. And then again you have the organism at the third trophic level. These are the secondary consumers known as the carnivores. Then again you can see these carnivores. Okay, these secondary carnivores, they are eaten up by the tertiary tertiary consumers, which are the top carnivores. Okay, at each step the energy is being lost in the form of heat, and only 10% of the energy is being transferred. And you can see then finally the organism, they will die, and the detritus will be broken down by the detritivores and the decomposers, and this will help in recycling of the nutrients. Okay, so here in this image, 4 trophic levels are being shown to you. First trophic levels are producers, second trophic level are the primary consumers, then you have the secondary consumers, and then finally you have the tertiary consumers, which are the top carnivores. So energy always flows in one direction, from producers to the consumers, and in each step 10% of the energy is only transferred and 90% of the energy is being lost. Okay, so 90% of this energy is used by the plants for various processes such as respiration, growth and reproduction. So 90% of the energy is lost. Only 10% of the energy is being transferred to the next one. So from the producers to the herbivores, and here you can see only 10% of the energy of the herbivores is transferred to the carnivores now. So this is known as 10% law of energy. Clear? So at each level energy is being lost. Clear? So with this, we end this session. I hope this session was quite knowledgeable for you. We'll meet you in the next session. Thank you very much for listening.